Today, we're going to talk about how to help kids with learning disabilities during distance learning. We have Kara Ball with us here today. Kara is a STEM educator with Baltimore City Public Schools. She previously taught both elementary special education and general education and was a finalist for National Teacher of the Year. With Understood, she serves as an expert and an Understood Teacher Fellow. And as you'll learn from her here today, she was both a student and an educator who learns and thinks differently. We're so glad to have you here with us today. Hi, Kara.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about what school was like for you when you were growing up and what the challenges you faced and what helped you persist.
Challenge would be the most accurate word to describe the experience. I always felt like I was 2 steps behind everybody else, and a lot of times my focus was on just trying to catch up, which meant that I wasn't really grasping the content that I was learning. One of my best examples is trying to take notes in class. It was done on paper and pencil, and my teacher would write it on the board. And by the time I would get done with the first part, she would already be on the second and third and going back and erasing the section that I was just now trying to copy. But I had friends. I had great friends who understood how challenging it was and were willing to share their notes with me, which helped me to keep up, at least in that aspect of life. However, there was also periods of time when something as simple as being called on in class to read a passage was incredibly stressful because I would be trying to figure out which portion of the text I was responsible for reading, would be practicing reading that passage so I didn't make a mistake in front of my peers, and therefore wasn't listening at all to what everybody else was reading and was only getting a small portion of the text. And that was pretty much, consistent throughout all of my school experience, whether it was secondary or college. And even now as an adult, I still experience challenges. They're just a little bit different. So in addition to having, incredible friends who were willing to help me and support me, the real reason I knew to ask my friends for help was because of my dad. So my dad is also dyslexic. And growing up, he made sure that I always knew that I could do anything I wanted to do. It just might take a little bit more persistence than the rest of my peers. And my dad also understand, uniquely because he himself is dyslexic, that I'm going to learn a little bit differently than everybody else. I do incredibly well with hands-on experiences and anything that really justifies the why or makes an abstract concept more concrete. So when I was struggling with geometry, we built a treehouse. When I didn't understand the principles of force and motion, we bought model rockets and launched them out of the field behind our house. Everything I did with my dad as a child, at some point I have done with my students as a teacher. He really, truly instilled in me this idea that learning didn't have to be rote memorization and that every student could be successful.
And there are some kids, of course, who are doing well with distance learning, but we know that many others are struggling. What do you see as the biggest challenges for kids who learn and think differently? What challenges are they facing in this distance learning environment?
So the biggest challenge that I've seen for all of our students, and even more so for our students who learn differently, is access. Just being able to get logged in to the right platform to use has been incredibly difficult for students. Depending on the school system that your child is enrolled in, they may not be able to have automatic login. They may have to remember their login information. And then there are a variety of platforms that are used. What they use for math might be different than what they use for reading, which means that there's potentially 2 login informations that they have to remember and retain. And then we're constantly updating the security features or deciding that a platform isn't the best one and we need to switch to something different, which means we're now asking those students to forget what we've already had them learn and come over to this platform and figure out how to do this. But that also poses problems for, the parents and caregivers. We're expecting them to understand all the changes as well.
So how can families support their children during distance learning? What tips and strategies can you offer?
So one of the first tips I would say is to obviously make a designated space, if you can, within your house for your child to learn. but I would make it a space where they can independently do some of their work and access, especially those platforms that we talked about a little bit earlier. And one of the strategies I've been recommending to our families and our students is to go out and get one of those like trifold poster boards. And if you can't go and get a poster board, use one of those cardboard boxes you get when packages are delivered. And inside of that trifold board, use that as a learning corral so that your child has everything they need displayed. So for myself, I always struggle with multiplication. So put a multiplication table on that trifold board. Maybe they have a login for math that they have to type in every day. Put that login for math on the board for them. Your teacher's email address, put it on the trifold board. That way your child doesn't have to go and find the information. They have everything they need right in front of them and they can see it. And it also kind of gives them a nice quiet space to work. Another thing that I recommend to parents, and it's not so much as an academic piece, but maybe a morale booster. One of my favorite things as a teacher was to decorate the hallways with our bulletin boards and to display student work. And our students are working incredibly hard right now, but they're not getting that praise or feedback the same way they would in a school building. So why not make a place in your house where you could display some of your students' work? It gives them a little bit of pride in the effort that they're doing, and it also allows you the opportunity to see some of the stuff that they're doing in school. One of my favorite resources is our local public libraries. Many of your local libraries are open and have librarians who are eager to get books into your home with your children. One of my favorite things as a teacher, I spent 13 years cultivating my classroom library, and every time we would teach a new subject, content, maybe a season or a theme or a holiday, I would bring out different books and my students would be waiting for the new text to come out. Kids love books, and getting them into their hands, especially right now during virtual learning, is a crucial piece of their literacy development. So my suggestion to you would be to contact your classroom teacher and ask them, what are they learning, what's coming up, and then you can usually go online to your public library website, you can request books in those categories, and then you can designate a space in your home where you can put out some of these books and maybe set aside a specific time for you and your child to sit down and read them together. It would be a great way to connect and unplug and maybe just decompress from the day.
Those are great suggestions for families, Kara. I'd like to flip it now to talk a little bit about educators and the advice you have for educators about how to provide accommodations and effective supports during distance learning.
So my first recommendation is always going to be to go to your special education teacher. They are the experts in your building. They're going to be your experts in your digital classroom. Work with them first. A lot of times they'll get information or resources from your school system about what is available and what the students can access, and they can share that information with you. My second person that I would say to go to are the families of the students to see what's working for them. Because if it's not working, then you're going to have to work together to troubleshoot and to find a solution. And with that comes the understanding that there are going to be limitations. There are going to be things that families and parents and caregivers can't access at home. And there's also going to be things that a teacher is going to say, we're not allowed to access that. It's not granted, it's not approved. And to have those conversations in order to work together to be able to figure out what type of resources can be used to help with accommodations, to help give the student the best access to the learning platforms. One of the suggestions I've been making to our teachers is to record as much as they can. I'm currently in school in an online program, and I selected it because of my learning disabilities and the ability to watch lectures, to go back and watch class videos, to go back and look at a screencastify version of the presentation I saw, and I can go back as many times as I need. Which really impacts me as somebody who takes information in at a different pace than my peers. So if a teacher can do that, record your session, and then put it in a designated space for your students, not only can the students access it, but the parents and caregivers can access it. I would also recommend to set up either sessions with parents or to make video recordings or a PDF style document of any tools you expect the students to use, because they're going to be the on-site tech support troubleshooting if a student gets stuck. School systems have tech support, But in reality, the parents are going to be the first people trying to figure out how to help that out. And it's best if they have a resource to go to if they get stuck. So making videos of the tools you expect students to use for both students and parents and caregivers to access is also something I highly recommend.
Thanks for those suggestions, Kara. You touched on this a little bit, but I'd love to hear more about how teachers and families can work together to find solutions when distance learning isn't working for a child, especially, if they're not getting the content, they're not understanding it, they're not completing their work. What are some of your suggestions for that to strengthen that family to school partnership?
First and foremost is always going to be having those open lines of communication. And one of the suggestions that I made for a couple of my friends who are in this situation was to set up weekly meetings. So when you're in a school building, you have weekly co-teaching or planning meetings. Instead, why not set those same meetings up with your parents? And if the parents and caregivers can't come every week, that's fine. But at least once a week, you have an opportunity where you can sit down and discuss, the pros, the cons, the pluses, the deltas, what's working, what's not working. But I also think there's a really important piece of pre-teaching that needs to go on to explain to parents and caregivers what's coming. Because a lot of times the problems that we're encountering are that the information being taught to students is drastically different than the information a parent or caregiver might have received when they were in school. Making sure that families understand that it's okay to ask for help, that it's okay to say, I don't know how to do partial product, where can I look for this? And I would tell families that if they're going to do that, that's a great opportunity to show your child that it's okay not to know. That, when I don't know something, I'm going to go online and I'm going to look it up, or I'm going to ask another adult who might be able to help me with it, and I'm going to learn. Virtual learning is a we model for learning. It takes everybody involved to make sure that our students are being as successful as possible in this current situation.
Kara, thank you so much for joining us today. We learned so much from you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure being here.
And thanks so much, everyone, for watching. We'd love to hear from you. Tell us how distance learning is going for you. Follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us.